Hello everybody, good afternoon. If you're tuning in, we are actually filming live here at General Assembly, located at Space Mob. And I have Aziza here with me from General Assembly. So Aziza, what's going on today? Can you...
So today's super exciting. We're hosting a whole bunch of activities on campus. We're having our UX design hiring day. So if you're looking for an awesome UX designer, you should come by General Assembly today. If you're looking for an awesome web developer, you should come by tomorrow. So for those of you guys who don't know, General Assembly is a tech education company. We were founded in New York about 5 years ago. And we set up Singapore about a year and 3 months ago. And we've just moved into our brand new space at Space Mob.
Nice.
Come over, I'll show you some of our team members. And we'll show you some of our students in a bit.
For those who just joined us, we're filming our episode 2 of AsiaLaw Network's FB Live. So today we're going to talk about data privacy and PDPA laws. We're going to join Jeremiah Chu in a bit in the room, but now Aziza here from General Assembly is going to introduce her team to us.
Awesome. We're just going to say hello to my team. Hey guys. Okay, so we're just going to introduce you guys. That's Lani. She's an admissions producer. She's on a call with someone who wants to join our course. That's Jeremiah. He's our lead web development instructor. That's Suhui. She's the awesome person who runs our marketing. So if you want to do anything with GA, Suhui is the person to reach out to. That's Mitch. He's our admissions producer. And that's Kylan. She's our web development instructional assistant.
Hi.
Okay. So the rest of the team, you know, some of them are in the classrooms.
Right.
Some of them are at the event today.
Okay.
We're just going ahead to the event space. And I think when you were filming last week,
Yes.
the cafe wasn't open.
Yeah, exactly.
So the cafe is open today.
Nice.
You can say hello to Marcus from the cafe.
Marcus, I need coffee.
Hey guys.
Hi, Marcus. So
Yeah, if you want an awesome cup of coffee, you should come over here to the cafe. They're open to members of the public as well. And this is where all the cool kids are.
I'm coming here later.
Okay. That's Dava. She's our frontlines associate.
Nice.
And,
There's an event going on today?
Yeah,
I
there
see.
is. So
Lots of people.
We're doing a hiring event for our UX design graduates. So all of the people in the room are graduates presenting to potential employers.
Wow.
So we kind of like flip the usual hiring day. So students are behind these desks and they're presenting their awesome work. Just want to say hello to Joyce. She's our UX design instructional assistant.
Hi,
and
Joyce.
that's Zizi. He's our lead UX design instructor.
Hi, Zizi.
Yeah. Let's just go around here a bit.
Okay.
Want to say hello to Terrence here. I thought it might be nice like if one of our students said a couple of words. So we've got Terrence here. He's just going to be graduating from web development in a little bit. Terrence, you want to say hello?
Hi, how's everyone doing?
Hi, Terrence.
Hi.
Are you excited today?
I suppose regular amount of excitement. I'm not involved in the meet and greet. Mine will be in 3 or 4 weeks' time.
Okay.
Yeah.
What kind of
Fantastic.
projects are you building right now?
I'm currently doing a game that it's a group project, and I'm working with my teammates to develop a game that can be played cross-server.
Okay.
So, I'm quite excited about that.
Looking forward to it.
Presentations this Friday.
Fantastic.
That's
All
all.
the best.
All right.
Great.
Yeah, is that all? Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Terrence.
So Terrence goes through a super intensive 12-week program.
Right.
And the people over here, they went through an intensive 10-week UX design program.
Right.
And yeah, if you guys are looking to hire, come over to campus today. If
Okay.
you want developers, come over tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
And here's one of our classes. So it's project week, which means that some of the students will be in class, some of them will be learning from the student lounges that we just passed by. And yeah, I'll leave you to it. And good luck for your session.
Thank you so much.
Fantastic.
All the best. See you. Okay, we're heading back to where we're filming our FB Live. Once again, for those who just joined us, this is AsiaLawNetwork.com, and basically our core mission is to enable people like you and me to access legal services quickly and affordably. So let's introduce the team. Hello, hi everybody. Well, here we have Jeremiah Chu from Lee & Lee, so we're going to be speaking to him very soon. In the meantime, I'll bring you... In the meantime, I'll bring you through the team members. We have Pihon, we have Wilfred from E27, Kenneth, who's helping us with the filming and the cameras, and of course Gabriel behind the camera. So for those who are just joining us, Once again, this is Asia Law Network's FB Live sessions, and this is our second of our series. And today we have Jeremiah Chu,
Hello,
who's joining us to talk about PDPA and data privacy laws. So, for those people who are just joining us, please remember that if you have any questions at all about PDPA or privacy, data privacy, please fill up the questions in the comments box, and we'll try to answer them, as many of them as possible today.
That's right.
So usual thing, sign up above and key in your questions below. So I'm just going to briefly introduce, of course, our partners. A quick shout out to E27. Thank you very much for helping us to showcase our FB Live. We have General Assembly, whom you've seen earlier on, and Startup Bootcamp FinTech Singapore. So Jeremiah Chu is from Lee & Lee, and today he's going to talk about PDPA and data privacy. So if you have a question, go ahead and ask it in the comments box below. So please put in your questions so that we can answer them today, okay? Great. So maybe let's start and talk about. So one of the questions we always ask, right? We always hear what PDPA. We hear PDPA a lot, like everywhere, and people will say that, hey, you better be careful of the data you're collecting. For any tech company, especially e-commerce, we collect a lot of data, especially like credit card information and things like that. So can you tell us what? A brief history of PDPA and how it came about, and some of the core rules, exactly, around it.
Yeah, well, Cherilyn, I think that's a good place to start. The PDPA stands for the Personal Data Protection Act, and it's an act that was first passed in Parliament in 2012.
Right.
Although it came into operation in various stages. I think the Do Not Call registry provisions came into operation first.
Yes.
And subsequently, the other provisions of the PDPA came into operation. And this was over a period of 2 years, in 2013
right.
and 2014.
Right.
Now, the PDPA is just like any other act or statute that has been passed by Parliament. So it has the force of law. And what that means is that if you don't comply with the PDPA, there will be legal consequences to face.
Which is why we all need to know about PDPA. So let's start. Maybe you can tell us something about what is going on with PDPA. And I think recently there are a few cases. Maybe using examples is easier to demonstrate, like how PDPA affects us and the people, as in anybody that's collecting data, especially for startups. I'm sure all of us collect data to do marketing and things like that. So can you tell us?
Without going into too much detail, the PDPC, and that stands for the Personal Data Protection Commission,
right.
They are the agency that enforces the PDPA in Singapore.
Okay.
And they've recently released quite a bundle of decisions, and it's been quite a flurry of decisions in the past few months.
Right.
I think on last count there must have been 6 or 7 decisions.
Yeah.
And a lot of the decisions relate to organizations that are not necessarily very big organizations. I don't know how big these organizations are, but I would wager that some of them are actually SMEs.
Right.
And what happened is that some of these organizations they just didn't put in adequate measures to protect the personal data that they collected, and as a result. There was some kind of unauthorized disclosure of personal data.
Right.
Somebody found out about it, made a complaint to the PDPC, and the PDPC found that the organization hadn't taken appropriate measures.
Okay.
And for some of those organizations, they imposed a fine. For some of those other organizations, they just gave a warning.
Right.
But I think the key point to note is that all of the PDPC's decisions are actually published on their website.
Okay, so all these are public.
Yes, that's right.
Right.
So if I were a customer of the organization and I see that organization has been flagged out as not having complied with the PDPA, I would be concerned.
Right.
I would think twice before giving my personal data to that organization.
Yeah, in fact, these days I'm a bit skeptical and I'm a bit sensitive about giving away information, especially like all these drawers and forms and vouchers. I try not to give out my data too much. Running through, I think you've written an article, right, together with Mark Toh.
That's right.
So it's on our website. So it's on learn.AsiaLawNetwork.com. It's a quick checklist for everything you need to know, a practical guide to the PDPA. And I think we're going to run through some of this information from this article. So for those who have already read this article, please feel free to ask any questions with regards to the article or anything that you need to clarify on. So you did mention about PDPA and how these organizations can be fined because someone lodges a complaint, right?
Yep.
And that can be anybody. Anybody on the street or anybody that sees data lying around, they can actually file a complaint. So would you like to give an example?
Cherilyn, if I can just interrupt there.
Sure. Yeah.
So the PDPA is a complaints-based regime.
Right.
And so what that means is that...
it's going to be successful in Singapore. No, I'm kidding.
Well, Singaporeans love to complain.
Yes.
But my point is that, before the PDPC actually investigates into a potential breach of the PDPA,
right.
Somebody has to have made a complaint.
Okay.
So I think that also goes towards good customer management.
Right.
If you manage your customers well, and if you comply with the PDPA in terms of telling the customers, look, these are the types of personal data that I'm collecting about you, and these are the ways in which I'm going to use that personal data,
right.
Then it's much less likely that the customer is going to lodge a complaint about you.
Okay, so it's kind of like a practice that we all have to adhere to.
That's right.
A good practice, right?
Right.
And management. Okay, for those who just joined us, we are AsiaLawNetwork.com. I'm Cherilyn, and we have Jeremiah Chu here from Lee & Lee. Maybe we'll just break it up a bit. Can you tell us a bit about your work at Lee & Lee?
Sure. Well, I'm a 6-year senior associate at Lee & Lee.
Yes.
And I'm actually in the intellectual property department, and we do a very wide range of work over there. And that doesn't just include your traditional types of intellectual property like trademarks, copyrights, and patents. We also deal with things like technology, telecommunications, as well as the PDPA, and that's why I'm here today.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know what Lee & Lee is, Lee & Lee is a firm that was established in 1955 by the late and great Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. You might have heard about him.
Yes.
And we celebrate our 61st anniversary this year.
Wow.
We are a full service law firm, and we
older
don't.
than my mom.
Right. We are a full service law firm, so
Yes.
we cover all areas of law.
Right.
Intellectual property and PDPA is just one aspect
Right.
of what we cover.
Okay, fantastic. So what interests you the most when it comes to PDPA?
How I find the PDPA to be interesting is that I think almost everybody in Singapore should be concerned about it. I mean, I think our talk today is geared towards maybe SMEs or smaller startups.
Startups and SMEs, correct.
But the fact of the matter is that I think almost every organization will come into contact with personal data at some point in time.
Right.
I mean, unless you're operating a one-man show out of a cave somewhere.
Yeah.
So when I talk about the relevance of PDPA, most organizations will have employees, and when you hire an employee, you'll be collecting, using, and disclosing some kind of personal data about them.
Yes.
So the PDPA immediately becomes relevant.
Right.
And there are many other organizations out there whose business models, by their very nature, require them to collect, use, or disclose personal data of their customers or clients. And that's also relevant.
Right.
And even if we are not talking about organizations, even if we are talking, you need to know your rights under the PDPA as well. What can you do in relation to organizations that collect your personal data? Because I think we live in an increasingly interconnected world.
Yes.
And every day you are sharing more and more types of personal data.
Right.
I mean, depending on what you do.
Yeah. You were just sharing with us an example earlier on about the condo management. I mean, just to bring you guys in a bit about like how PDPA affects us on a day-to-day basis in our daily lives, right? So this particular example is probably a good, it's very telling of how PDPA actually affects all of us.
Right. So, well, Cherilyn, thank you for that lead. So one of the recent decisions of the PDPC
Yes.
relates to a condominium and specifically about the security measures at a condominium.
Right.
So, well, the full decision is available on the PDPC's website, but I summarize it briefly.
Yes.
So the security guards at a condominium, they have a sort of logbook or data book.
Yes.
And every time there are guests that come into the condominium, they are required to fill in their certain details about themselves,
Yeah.
which contain personal data.
Usually your name,
Yeah.
your phone number,
Yeah,
your IC.
your name, your phone number, who are you visiting?
Yes.
Why are you visiting that person?
And your car plate number if you're driving a
Yes,
car.
that's right.
Right.
And all of this will go into the security logbook. Well, that's all fine and dandy. That's perfectly legitimate.
Yeah.
But what happened in this instance is that the logbook was apparently left unattended at certain periods of time.
At the kiosk, I mean the security
Yeah, the
guard
security
post.
post. So what that meant is that absolutely anybody could have just gone over and flipped through the logbook and
Right.
looked at the details of the people inside there.
Yeah.
And what happened is that one disgruntled resident of that condominium was very concerned about this potential security breach. And he lodged a complaint to the PDPC. And the PDPC actually found that the managing agent of the condominium hadn't taken adequate measures to protect the personal data in its control.
Right.
And because of that, issued a warning to that managing agent.
Well, as you can see, it can be as simple as that. So, I mean, imagine us, right? Startups, SMEs, we deal with information every single day. Like we get sign-up forms. For example, if you're signing up with us, you're probably giving us some kind of personal information. I hope not too personal. We actually have all these data collected in a certain place, and we have to be careful of how we use them. Relating to that, we actually have a question that's coming in from Izan Ho. So Izan says that if I'm a consumer-facing company, but I work with many freelance contractors under a fully owned subsidiary, what is the exposure when my contractors in the subsidiary commits a breach on personal data with customers of the main consumer-facing company? So if you're just joining us, we are filming live from General Assembly, and General Assembly is now located at Space Mob itself. This is Asia Law Network's second episode of our FB Live, and today we're talking about PDPA and privacy laws. With us, we have Jeremiah Chu from Lee & Lee, and we're here to answer your questions. So feel free to key in your questions in the comments box below. Remember to ask questions relating, for example, to your startups, or if you have any issues facing PDPA, or any questions at all when it comes to PDPA.
All right, so Izan, thank you for your question. And I think that is a very common scenario that we face in the marketplace.
Yes.
So if I understand your question correctly, your consumer-facing company A is collecting some sort of personal data from its consumers. And this personal data that it collects might make its way into the fully owned subsidiary B and possibly to contractors or freelance contractors of B. So your question is, what is the potential exposure? And I think that there are quite a few aspects to that question, but one very important aspect I would like to point out is the data intermediary aspect. So the PDPA it does provide for a certain class of organizations known as data intermediaries. And what data intermediaries are, they process personal data on behalf of another organization.
Okay.
So in this instance, if the subsidiary B,
Yes.
or for that matter, the contractors of subsidiary B, process personal data on behalf of company A, then they would be data intermediaries of company A. Now, why I have to set that out very clearly is because the PDPA states that a company or an organization remains responsible, it remains liable for acts carried out by its data intermediaries. So what that means is that you have to keep, you being the company A, the consumer-facing company A, you have to keep a very tight rein on your data intermediaries. You have to put measures in place to make sure that any personal data you transfer to them is going to be well protected. Well, I'm not going to go into details, every single detail of what you can do, but I think the main point I want to make is that you should definitely have a contract with this company B or any freelance contractors of company B. So to repeat, if you are transferring personal data to any other organization and they are processing the personal data on your behalf, you need a contract with them.
Right.
And that contract should at least contractually oblige them to do certain things, to comply with the PDPA.
Right.
Because if they don't comply with the PDPA, you are going to be in trouble.
So compliance with PDPA might mean proper collection, proper storage, and proper maintenance of the data?
Yes, well, amongst other things.
Right.
Well, Cherilyn, maybe on this particular question, I think I can give a very practical example that was available. Is one of the PDPC's recent decisions as well.
Okay.
And it involves the SGX, the Singapore Exchange, which is a very big company.
Yes.
And a printing company, which I shall not name.
Yeah.
So what happened is that SGX hires this printing company to print and deliver certain statements to its customers, to its clients. SGX, of course, that's the share trading and all that. And so what happens is that in this particular case, this printing company was actually a data intermediary of SGX.
Correct.
And something went wrong. The printing company actually printed some wrong details in the statements. And what happened was that personal data of certain customers was disclosed to other customers wrongly.
Right.
And that is a very serious breach, because I can't remember offhand.
I can't imagine how serious
what the data contains, but it might contain things like their SGX account number. All of that is quite potentially damaging.
Right.
So what happened was that the printing company was found to have breached the PDPA, but SGX was found to be not guilty. And the reason is because SGX had a very secure structure in place with the company. In their contract, they had certain contractual clauses which obliged that printing company to comply with the PDPA. And internally, they also had their own really solid security measures. And so the PDPC found that even though SGX is liable, or responsible for the data intermediary, they had actually discharged their obligations.
Right.
And only the printing company was in the wrong, so to speak.
Interesting. So that means, Izan, if you're a company A, so you have to make sure that you sign contracts that make your intermediaries, right? Data intermediaries responsible for their actions, which means making sure that the data is collected, used, maintained, disclosed, and stored properly. So, all our stuff right now in the cloud. I mean, we all know about the cloud, right?
Yes, that's right.
So can you tell us a bit about PDPA and how it affects us? I mean, if we work directly off the cloud. For example, what if the data center is the one that breached, PDPA, and had data being exposed? How should we protect ourselves then against the data centers?
Well, I think that makes a very important point, and that is be very careful about what kind of information you place on the cloud.
Right.
I give an example, Google Drive, because that's what we're looking at right now. And you don't really have any control over the terms and conditions when you sign up to Google Drive. You can't negotiate with them because they're Google, right?
Exactly. You just have the option to tick the terms and I agree, right?
That's right. So what that means is that if you load something on Google Drive and it gets disclosed inadvertently, or somebody finds out about it or sees what they are not supposed to see, your contract with Google might not really help you.
Right.
So I think you have to be very careful about what you put on the cloud. You have to consider what security arrangements the cloud has. And I'm not saying that Google Drive has poor security arrangements, but let's just give another practical example since we are on this point.
Yeah.
Now, let's say you put a document onto Google Docs, and it is technically a public document in the sense that if anybody knows the correct URL, the correct thing to type into the browser, you can actually access that document. Even though I don't send you the link, you can access that document.
Yeah.
So if you're putting something very sensitive out there,
Right.
such as your customers'
Information. Or
bank account details or IC number or whatever,
Yeah.
you have to be very cautious because what that means is that somebody who types in the correct strings of letters and numbers could technically access that personal data.
Right.
And
Makes us liable.
I don't cite this as a frivolous example because there's more than one example
Right.
of this kind of thing happening and the PDPC taking enforcement action against organizations. So again, I won't name the organizations, but I will give the example.
Sure.
This organization had a membership system whereby members could sign up
Yes.
and they could use the organization's online system
Yeah.
to access their membership details,
Right.
which included personal data,
Yeah.
things like the name and
Yeah,
the
usually,
date of birth.
yeah, they make us like
Yep.
key in IC numbers
That's right.
things like that, yeah.
So what happened is that somebody, a customer from the organization, found that by changing the string of numbers at the end of the URL, he could actually access another person's personal data.
Aha.
Well,
For those of us who have a bit more time, yes.
well,
You
so
might just...
I mean, again, it's not a flippant or frivolous example because it's happened in practice.
Yeah, I know.
And what happened was that this very concerned person
Yes.
made a complaint to the PDPA,
Yeah.
and that organization was again given a warning.
Yeah.
And the warning was posted on the PDPC's website.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, this is interesting, right? Because where it comes to things like this, membership forms and things like that, it has got to do with who we engage as our coders, right?
Yeah, well, in a way,
tech.
in a way.
Yeah. So we have to make sure that if we're going to do anything e-commerce related or collecting data on a online platform, we got to make sure that basically we have to make sure that it's compliant with the PDPA, which it's something that we may not even think about on a.
That's right. Well, to give some practical tips about using stuff on cloud, again, I guess it depends on the application software you use, but. The main point is that you put something on a cloud, technically, depending on the software you use, it might be a public document and anybody can access it.
Yes.
So how do we work around that? I think the PDPA would suggest that you put in some kind of security measures to make sure that the information that you store on the cloud is protected. So for example, if I put an Excel spreadsheet onto the cloud, maybe an additional level of security I could take is to encrypt that spreadsheet or password protect that spreadsheet. So that even if some random third party gets hold of that spreadsheet, it cannot extract information from that spreadsheet.
Okay. So for those of us who use the cloud very often, like even we do that, if you are storing information, personal data on the cloud, that can include names, IC numbers, phone numbers, anything, right? Date of birth, even date of birth, right? Those are information which you should password protect or encrypt on the cloud. So maybe you can tell us a bit about. Okay, sorry, we have some questions coming in. Just to recap, we are here now at Space Mob in General Assembly. A quick shout out to our partners, E27, Startup Bootcamp FinTech Singapore, and General Assembly, of course. So we have a question coming in from Miranda Pua. If we set up a Singapore company, but our operations are in another country, would we be captured by the PDPA, and how does it affect us? I mean, so.
Yeah, well, Miranda, let me just say that is a very common question, and it's a very relevant question, because I think a lot of companies nowadays have operations in more than one country. So to answer your question, if you set up a Singapore company, your operations are in another country, but you are collecting some sort of personal data from Singapore, you would be captured by the PDPA. Of course, if you are solely operating in some other country, say the UK, and you're not collecting, using, or disclosing personal data from anybody in Singapore at all, then I don't think the PDPA would be relevant.
Right.
But if, let's say, you are collecting personal data from Singapore, users in Singapore, and you are transferring that data to another country, then yes, the PDPA would be relevant. I would also add that there's another important point, is that different countries may have different data privacy rules.
Exactly.
So, for example, if you are in the UK and you are collecting data from users in Singapore and transferring it to the UK, you would have to comply with both the PDPA in Singapore. You will also have to comply with the UK's data protection law.
Right.
That's right.
So you get the best of, I mean,
The
basically
best of
the most stringent. Okay. In Asia, which are the countries actually that are more stringent when it comes to PDPA other than,
well,
Singapore?
Hong Kong, well, they can't lose out to Singapore, right? So they, don't quote me on that. They've recently come up with their own data protection law as well.
Okay.
So what I can say is that more and more countries are taking data protection and privacy quite seriously.
Okay.
I think for at least in the Southeast Asian region, Singapore is one of the front runners, one of the first to have implemented such a data privacy law.
Very good.
Of course, in Europe and the US, they've had it for years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes we also tend to take our guide or our cue from events that happen in Europe and the US.
Okay, this is interesting. So another thing that you were talking about transferring of data from one country to another, right? Does that mean that if we're collecting personal data in Singapore, we need to use a server or something that is located here in Singapore? What if we are, for example, using Amazon or something else that's in the US? Then do we need to inform our consumers when we're collecting data that our servers are not located in Singapore?
It's an excellent question, Cherilyn. Normally charge you 500 for answering that.
But this is free now on Facebook Live.
So, well, the simple answer is that if you're collecting personal data from people in Singapore and you want to store it on a server that's located overseas, you will have to comply with the PDPA when it comes to that storage.
Right.
In particular, one of the obligations under the PDPA is known as a transfer limitation obligation. And, well, you can read more about it in detail on the PDPC's website.
Right.
But in a nutshell, transfer limitation obligation says that if you're going to transfer data to another country, you need to comply with certain requirements.
Right.
And one of those requirements is that you need to make sure that the data will be protected to a comparable standard as compared to the PDPA.
Okay. So it has to be of comparable standard.
That's right.
Does it have to be disclosed?
Sorry, does what have to be disclosed?
The location of, for example, where we are storing.
Yes. So, well, there's no straight answer to that.
Right.
But in most situations, in many situations, I think a best practice is to actually tell your customers whom you're collecting personal data from, hey, I am going to collect your personal data, and one of the places that I might store the personal data is actually on a server in XYZ country.
Right. Okay. So another question I have that's linked to this is that, for example, we're all like, there's so many e-commerce companies out there right now, right?
That's right.
And how PDPA sometimes comes in our terms of use and our terms and conditions of use of site.
That's right.
How are those structured according to, for example, the business model that you have? Is that the place where you have to edit and change and update? Give us some examples, maybe?
Sure. Well, Cherilyn, I think you might have been alluding to terms of use and privacy policies.
Oh, yeah, correct. Privacy policy.
So, again, in my article, which is on Asia Law Network's website, I think I give a few more details about that. But what I want to say in brief is that if you are an organization that collects, uses, or discloses personal data in some way, and I think I've established earlier that that is practically every organization.
Yes.
You should have a privacy policy in place.
Right.
Because one of the obligations under the PDPA is that you need to make information about how you handle personal data open to everybody. They call it the openness obligation. You need to be open about how you deal with personal data.
Okay.
And because of that, I think it is good practice for every organization to have some kind of privacy policy in place. Now, there's no one-size-fits-all solution to a privacy policy.
Okay.
I think some of the things you have to consider are, number one, what types of personal data are you collecting? And number two, what purposes are you collecting this personal data for?
Right.
And number three, how are you going to treat this personal data? You know, are you going to store it on your server in Singapore? Are you going to transfer it to the US or the UK? And another thing that you need to put in the data in a privacy policy is context of a representative in your company that people can contact if they have questions about PDPA.
Correct.
This is actually a requirement under the PDPA.
Yeah.
You need to have at least one such representative who is known colloquially as the data protection officer.
Yes. So I know privacy policy is something that many e-commerce sites use, right? And we get this a lot, in fact, through AsiaLaw Network, that startups need help with their privacy policy, and they typically want to, for example, use a template and stuff, which we are, like what you suggested just now, every single company is different. So the privacy policy actually differs from one to another. And please remember to go back to your site and look at your privacy policy and make sure you have a data protection officer that's named, right, in the privacy policy, so that in the event that anybody has any complaints or issues, they can contact the person immediately. Because if they can't get you, then the next step would be to go to the PDPC.
In fact, there has been more than one organization that has been fined for not having a data protection officer. So
wow.
Let's not go there.
Yeah.
Just make sure you have one.
So go back, look through your privacy policy, and make sure you have a data protection officer right there. Once again, for those who are just joining us, we're on our second episode of AsiaLaw Network's Facebook Live. Here we have Jeremiah Chew from Lee & Lee talking about PDPA and privacy laws. If you have not seen our episode 1, which is tips for startups on the law, please visit our Facebook page, AsiaLaw Network's Facebook page. You'll be able to see it there. We also do have last week's questions that will be answered coming up in an article, so do watch out for that. Right here, we have other questions that are coming. So talking about the privacy policy, right? We have this question that came up. How often should we update our privacy policy?
Well, that I think is a very pertinent question you ask. And the short answer is that my preference is to do it once and do it good.
Right.
And after that, unless you're telling me that the types of personal data you collect keep changing, then if that's the case, then you might need to change your privacy policy from time to time. But if you're very certain about what kinds of personal data you're collecting, then just do your privacy policy once and make sure that it's a solid one, and then you don't have to go and change it unless there's some kind of material change
Yes.
in your data processes.
Correct.
Take, for example, my own firm, Lee & Lee. On our website, we have our privacy policy. I crafted it.
Yeah.
It's been there for the past 3 years, and we've seen no need to change it.
Yeah, okay. Because there's not major changes in the use of your site.
Correct.
Okay, so one thing to note is that you have to change your privacy policy as much or as often as you change the kind of activity or data collection practices you have on the website. So if there's, like suddenly you're collecting a new kind of data or a new way of collecting the data, then you should actually update your privacy policy.
Yeah, so just to elaborate on that a bit, the PDPA really seeks to govern the collection, use, and disclosure of personal data. So what that means is that as an organization, if you're collecting, using, or disclosing personal data in any new way, for example, let's say previously you were only collecting names and NRI See numbers. But because you launched a new product or a new app, now you're also collecting phone numbers and addresses.
Right.
You need to tackle that point in your privacy policy. You need to update it.
Okay. Sounds good. So we have another question coming in. For startups that develop an app, sending push notifications in the form of promos, coupon, giveaways, or general alerts, are they required to give consent? What about creating WhatsApp or social media groups, phone numbers that are exposed in a group? Is this considered a breach?
Well, maybe I'll take the first part of the question first, because this is quite a complex question.
Yeah.
So we are talking about push notifications. So one thing I have to say about the PDPA from a very practical perspective is that one of the most important things is to actually keep your customers informed about what you're intending to do, and to seek their consent as well.
Right.
Because remember that the PDPA is a complaints-based regime.
Right.
So if your customer has been informed about what you're going to do with their personal data and they have given you the go-ahead, it's much less likely that they are going to complain about it.
Yes. Vice versa, if you are the user and you find that a company is abusing, their rights and using your information, you can also,
That's right.
seek their assistance in finding out what they're doing with information. If not, if you can't find their DPO, obviously lodge a complaint.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I think if you have, in this particular example, you're talking about an app and sending push notifications. I think from square one, when the customers download the app, you should already be seeking their consent to send these push notifications.
Right.
And I mean, this can be done quite simply. For example, have a checkbox, and the checkbox can say something along the lines of, if you would like to receive marketing material from us, including promos, coupon giveaways, general alerts, tick here. And after they have ticked it, I think that the likelihood of them complaining is lessened.
Right.
And if they don't tick it, then, don't send it to them.
Yeah. So I guess that's the part where you mentioned do it once, but do it well, right?
Yeah.
So if you think about all these from the start, then you don't have to keep worrying about it later on.
Well, Cherilyn, I would like to include a very important qualification there.
Right.
And that is because the PDPA also provides that you have to allow customers to withdraw their consent as well.
Oh, okay.
So let's say I'm a customer who, when I sign up for the app, I say, send me all your promos, coupon giveaways and vouchers. But subsequently, I change my mind. And I say, no, I don't want it anymore. I find it very annoying. You as the organization, you actually have to give me, the consumer, the right to withdraw consent.
Okay.
And you have to facilitate that.
Okay.
So it cannot be the case that once I get your consent, I can
Forever
be sending you
spammed.
marketing messages till the end of time. And it cannot be that way.
Okay.
That's right.
So that brings down to when you receive email alerts, does that also follow the same rules? That's the reason why you always have an unsubscribe button and, you know, like to allow people to unsubscribe for notifications.
Sorry, what
right?
kind of email alerts are you referring
so
to?
in just to add on to a question about this push notifications, right? Some of them come in like emailers, EDMs, and things like that. So that allows you to unsubscribe very, very quickly. So when you talk about the company facilitating unsubscribing for these alerts, how easily should they be done?
Well, as the easier it is to facilitate the withdrawal of consent,
right.
I think the less likely that somebody is going to lodge a complaint against you.
Right.
So the example you have just given,
right.
You know, on your email you have an option to unsubscribe. I think that's a great option.
Yeah.
But if it's in the form of an app, I think perhaps you should have a setting under the app, you know, under the control panel or something, that you can go there and say, I don't want to receive any more marketing messages.
Right.
Stop spamming me.
Okay, understand. Okay, before we go on to the next part of the question, for those who are just joining us, this is Asia Law Network's Facebook Live session, episode 2 on PDPA. We have here Jeremiah Chu from Lee & Lee. A quick shout out to our partners, E27, Startup Bootcamp, FinTech Singapore, General Assembly, who's helping us to promote this Facebook Live series. Great, so the next part of the question, what about creating WhatsApp or social media groups? So when you create, obviously, WhatsApp groups, you're sharing numbers, right? So is that considered a breach where you use WhatsApp to send out?
Firstly, there's no easy answer to this question. And I think one factor to this question is who is creating the WhatsApp or social media group. And I say that because a lot of the provisions of the PDPA do not apply to people who are acting in their personal or domestic capacity.
Okay.
So let's say I'm setting up a WhatsApp group with my friends or my family members. I don't need to go through the whole PDPA thing of, oh, you know, I need your express consent to before I can add you to the WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
So the PDPA is reasonable in that regard.
Okay.
You know, they understand that people might use personal data in the social setting, and that's not what it sets out to regulate. But what it does regulate is the actions of organizations. And if you're an organization and you're creating a WhatsApp or social media group, and you are adding your customers or even your employees to that, you should definitely
cover that.
Try to seek some consent first before doing that.
Right.
Especially if the WhatsApp or social media group has absolutely no relation to your business.
Yeah. And because also in that group, everyone will be sharing everyone else's number, right?
That's right.
Because for a WhatsApp group, you basically can see all the other group numbers. Okay. Interesting. So one question I always get is, you know, on your business cards,
yes,
you know, it's something that we give everyone, right? So if your phone number, if your cell phone number is on it, is it still covered as PDPA? Because we know that business numbers differs, right, from your private personal data.
So the PDPA does talk about this.
Okay.
And again, I won't go into too much detail, but there's a concept under the PDPA known as business contact information.
Yeah.
And many of the PDPA obligations do not apply to business contact information.
Right.
And, well, the full definition is set out in the PDPA. But basically, if I'm providing some information to you, and I do not provide it solely for a personal purpose, that means, in other words, there is some business purpose to providing that information, then it may be considered business contact information.
Right.
So let's say I meet you at some kind of networking event, and I say, hey, Cherilyn, you know, if you ever need legal advice, come and find me. Here's my business card. And my business card contains data about me, such as my name, my work email, my office telephone number, my position in the organization. I would say that in that context,
Right.
that would be business contact information.
Okay, so if I were to use those information for business purposes, for example, send you an update about how Asia Law Network is doing, will that be okay?
That's completely okay.
That's completely okay.
That's completely okay.
So there comes the question, right? There are many people who use their homes as offices. So what would you say about that? Any comments?
Yeah, and I think that the definition of business contact information that I mentioned just now, it does cover that. So going back to that again, if I'm providing you information not solely for personal purpose, it's for business purpose as well, then it wouldn't be covered by certain sections in the PDPA.
Yeah.
So if I run a business from home and I give you my home address, which is also my home office address, then I would say that in that context, that would be business contact information.
Okay.
Because it allows you to contact me at my business.
For business purposes, right? Same thing with cell phone, I assume?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so if you do have your cell phone numbers on your name cards, I mean, there's a reason why some people have two numbers, right? Two cell phone numbers, one for business and one for personal, because if it is on your name card, it's actually considered business contact information and people can use it for business purposes, right? Okay, so we have a question coming in from Kenneth. Thank you, Kenneth. Kenneth Ong, there is a DNC registry that the Singapore government manages. How do we startup owners check if someone has the phone numbers given to us as part of the registry? I think what he means is how can he check if the numbers were given to him and that numbers were actually protected by the DNC?
Sure. Well, firstly, the DNC registry is a public registry and it's established under the PDPA. I will be honest that I've personally not ever gone to the DNC registry to check the list.
Yes.
I have signed up.
Yeah.
I've signed up myself.
Yeah.
But I think if you go to the DNC registry's website, you should be able to find more information about that. What I would add is that I think you have to pay a prescribed fee to check the registry, so it's not free.
Right.
Yeah, it's not
so
free.
I think his concern is that, for example, if someone has given him a number to call, and they have given him consent to call, does he then still need to check with the DNC registry?
Yes, well, that's a very good question, Kenneth.
Yeah.
And the answer is that if you have obtained the clear and unambiguous consent of a particular person to use his personal data, to send him, marketing messages and stuff like that, then you shouldn't need to check with the DNC registry.
Okay.
So the critical part is the consent. If you have obtained that clear and unambiguous consent to send a person marketing messages, then go ahead and do so.
Right.
But I have to caveat that sometimes people think that they have obtained a clear consent, but they haven't actually obtained. It's not actually so clear in practice. So what I suggest is that you actually go and read the PDPC's guidelines. I think that they have some that are specific to the DNC registry, and you take a look and see what kind of consent, what type of consent you need to obtain.
Okay, so we do have. Thank you very much, Jeremiah. Not sure if that answers your question, Kenneth, but I think it's quite clear that if you get clear consent from the individual, then it should be okay. We have other questions coming in. So please share practical steps to make sure that I'm PDPA compliant. Once again, we do have an article that's written by Jeremiah and Mark that's online on our Facebook. Please check it out. It's a practical guide to making sure that you're PDPA compliant. You can also go to pdpc.gov.sg and check out some of the rules and regulations and some of the updates of the latest cases that you mentioned, right? And what are the decisions based on it? So if you're borderlining,
if you're on the verge of breaching the PDPA,
or you can be complained against. So please check that out, pdpc.gov.sg, right?
I'm sure the PDPC is grateful for your advertisement.
Yeah, I hope so. But for us, we're here to, once again, this is our FB Live session from AsiaLawNetwork.com. And our mission is basically to help people like you and I, basically, to get legal advice affordably and effectively and efficiently. So we have a question coming in from Yu Wei Heng Yu Wei. Can my company store NRI See numbers of students for attendance-taking purposes? The NRI See student list is pulled from MOE's web service, but we had complaints from lawyer parents that we can't store that data. So how can my company handle this?
Well, Yue, it's always the lawyers, isn't it?
Yes.
Creating problems.
No, because the lawyers are always the one looking out for, you know.
Yeah, well, Yue, I think there is a very useful guideline that you might want to refer to. So in the PDPC has actually published quite a few sector-specific guidelines.
Right.
And these sector-specific guidelines are for certain areas of industry, certain occupations where the collection, use, and disclosure of personal data are particularly important. And there's one such sector-specific guideline for the education sector. So you might want to take a look at that for the full answer. But what I can say to you in the meantime is I do wonder, is it absolutely necessary to collect the NRI See number of the student for attendance-taking purposes? I mean, back in the day when I was in school, they just needed my name and maybe my photograph.
To make sure that you're the person.
To make sure that I'm that person, you know.
Yeah.
I don't think there was any other Jeremiah Chu in
Or
school. So the thing about NRI See numbers is that it's quite a sensitive
part of
piece of
anybody.
information to collect, and with somebody's NRI See number,
You can do a lot.
You might be able to do a lot of things.
Yes.
So you know, with my NRI See number and my birth date, you might be able to go to Mindef's website and book an IPPT for me. So
Yes. Don't do that, please.
so when it comes to NRI See numbers, and you know there are PDPC guidelines on NRI See numbers as well. Consider whether you really need to use that personal information.
So general rule of thumb is that we shouldn't be collecting more information than required, right?
Precisely.
So basically,
Precisely.
only collect information absolutely necessary. I mean, gone are the days where, you know, I mean, 10 years ago, right, where you fill up a lucky draw coupon and you have to fill in like your address, your IC number, your date of birth, basically all the information that you probably can go to the bank now and get things done.
Yeah,
Right.
Cherilyn, that actually brings me to another point. In my article, I talked about several misconceptions that people have about the PDPA.
Right.
and I think that this is one very common misconception. And it's especially common in Singapore because we have such a kiasu mentality, right?
Yes.
So I have a lot of organizations that say, you know, I'm just going to collect personal data in case I need it someday.
Yeah, since I'm collecting it, might as well collect everything, right?
But what the PDPA has to say about that is that you should only really collect personal data for purposes that are reasonable in the circumstances.
Right.
So the example I gave in my article was that of an event organizer. And the event organizer, when people sign up and they want to organize an event, that client of mine would collect information such as, you know, nationality, gender, date of birth.
Yeah.
And my question to that organization was, why do you need the nationality of that person? You know, I mean, is it the case that Malaysians cannot sign up for your event organizing services?
Yes.
Surely not.
Right.
So, you know, companies should really collect only the types of personal data that they absolutely need for the purposes of their business.
Right.
What is reasonable in the circumstances.
Okay. And if there are ways, of course, to encrypt or to password protect these information, the better, right? for that the person themselves to really regulate the use of that information?
Well, that's internally, I guess. When you are transferring data internally or to third parties, what the PDPA obliges you to do is to make reasonable security arrangements.
Right.
Again, I say reasonable because I think it has to vary depending on the type of data.
Yeah, and industry and circumstances at which
transferring a person's something common like a person's age might not be so sensitive as passing around his credit card details.
Right.
So we have to make sure that the security arrangement that we have in place corresponds to the sensitivity of that data.
Okay. Well, last question. Time is running out. That's really fast. Okay, from Sam. Sam says, can hospitals share patient scans and data legally in Singapore? If not, is it legal if they anonymize the data?
Yes. Well, again, Sam, there's no easy answer to your question. I will say that there's a sector-specific guideline for the healthcare sector. It's published on the PDPC's website, so you might want to take a look at that. But what I would say about your question is that you talk about sharing the patient data. I don't really know what kind of patient data that is, but looking at it from the PDPA framework, I would ask, have you sought consent from those patients to disclose that data? What kind of data are you disclosing? Is it particularly sensitive? And what are you disclosing that data for? Because there are certain exceptions that might apply.
Yes.
I don't think we have the time to go into detail, but things like research and analysis, you might be able to find a suitable exception. Now, that last point about anonymizing the data, yes, you are right to say that if you anonymize the data, I think you can use it without fear of breaching the PDPA. But one point I want to make about anonymizing the data is that sometimes in certain situations, you might think that you have anonymized the data or you have done something to the data so that the person can't be identified from it. But the reality is, somebody might still be able to identify the person from it. So let me give you an example. Say, let's take my height. I'm 1.7 meters, very average man in Singapore.
Yes.
You might think that in my medical record, if you blot out everything and you leave just the height, nobody is going to know
that's you.
That it's me.
Yeah.
But what if I was at a Tyrion Lannister cosplay convention?
Yeah.
And I'm the only person who's above 1.3 meters.
Yes.
It might very well identify me. So,
Yes.
I mean, my point is that you have to be very careful when you talk about anonymizing data because sometimes it's not as easy as we think.
You may think that just taking out the name is enough, but it is not. Right?
Or let's say IC numbers. You might XXX the last 4 digits, but the first few digits shows when I was born.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Interesting. So be careful and always seek legal advice. Well, we have to wrap up now. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time. But keep the questions coming. Following this FB Live session, we actually have an article to summarize what we have spoken about. And Jeremiah is going to help us with some of the questions you have asked. And please watch out for those questions. Next week, we have Wan Si, who will be sharing with us on FinTech and law, together with Sam Hall, the Program Director of Startup Bootcamp FinTech Singapore. So once again, thank you very much for joining us on the episode 2 of our Facebook Live sessions from our Asian Law Network Facebook Live series, with Q&A sessions with lawyers like Jeremiah Chu from Lee & Lee here. Thank you very much, Jeremiah, for joining us.
Thank you, Cherilyn. It's been a pleasure.
Once again, Asia Law Network's mission is to help people like you and I to get the right legal advice affordably and efficiently. We have a quick consult service that allows you to seek legal advice from $49. So feel free to come online on AsiaLawNetwork.com and you can speak to a lawyer actually from $49 to get clarification on some of your legal queries or any problems that you have. So we do have PDPA and covered under business advice. So go on to AsiaLawNetwork.com and get your advice from lawyers soon. Thank you. Quick shout out again to our partners, E27, thank you very much. Startup Bootcamp Fintech Singapore, and also General Assembly for helping us to promote this event. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jeremiah. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
I'll see you soon. Thank you. Great. See you guys. Bye.